Everyone to the final of Edinburgh Cup 2018. Congratulations to all the speakers for demonstrating excellent debating ability. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Jacqueline. I'll be your chair communicator and before pronouncing today, I'm introducing my panel.
Oscar Hegde.
And could I get the speaking orders and preferred pronouns of opening comment?
David speaking first, here this grade.
And Julie speaking second, she days.
And opening opposition.
Hi everyone, my name is Nish, so that's fine. Zannah, she.
Awesome. Closing opposition.
Mark speaking first, here again.
Sandhya speaking second, she days.
So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome the Prime Minister to open the motion.
Okay, so I'm just going to start with some mech, because this is kind of like, what are we talking about? I think the first thing to say is that what we obviously want is everyone to choose not to have kids, but then we will also be fine with as many people as we want, as are willing to kill themselves instantaneously, and we're fine, and we imagine that like this might be helpful kind of in the latter days, so we hope that this happens a lot, and presumably then all of the state resources that we currently use looking after kids and making sure they're okay, we can use stockpiling food and making AI nannies for the old people, so that that's okay. Like, given how much resources we spend keeping kids right, we think it would be less resources overall, so it's probably really not very difficult. Right. Why is it always immoral to have children, and why do we think that everyone should never do it? Well, I think the first thing to say is that, so the argument goes that children have rights. These rights are to freedom and the ability to define their own life. It is impossible to raise a child without infringing these rights. Therefore, you shouldn't have children, because having that means that you will necessarily infringe upon their rights. So why do we care about the right to freedom rather than say like rights to well-being? Well, I think it's pretty obvious, right? Like obviously, like if you were locked in a box, then you wouldn't be able to do anything. Your life wouldn't be reasonable. That's why we care about that's why we care about life to freedom over life. Even if you're alive but locked in a 1 by 1 meter box, you wouldn't want to do that if you're food forever. So this is why the ability to use your life is the important thing. But crucially then, like if you had an AI over you every single opportunity that was perfect at decision making, and it told you every single time what to do that would maximize your happiness, and forced you to do that, you wouldn't be living a life, right? You'd be a husk. You'd be like just like a sack of chemicals being prodded with happy things. Similarly, like if you like shoved some like IV drip that always made you feel euphorically happy, you wouldn't be living life, right? You would just be that. We think crucially, the only thing which makes happiness good is that we choose it, right? That's why we value consent so much. It's why we have democracy rather than AI dictatorship, which just would be better and save millions of lives. We just care about people choosing things. So I think this is very important. And then the thing is, do children have these rights that we care about? And I think the answer to this is also yes. Firstly, I challenge all to draw a line between adults and children that is consistent. I think if you can't draw that line, you just have to assume that kids have them too, because if there's a rough thing, we have to assume they do, given the risk of us doing bad things. But crucially, they do all the things that we associate with rights. They make choices, they have feelings about these choices affect their greater life in the future. Now, and okay, they have a slight diminished responsibility, but like some people are just idiots, right? Like I continually choose to eat terrible food, and it hurts me, and like I'm probably going to die slightly prematurely because of it. But like that's a cognitive failure. But we still demand the right to make that decision, because otherwise I'm not living. I'm just being this human husk. So okay, children are slightly less good at this, but they still definitely can do it, and therefore gain these rights over them. Or if they don't have these rights, their parents have like fiduciary rights over them to choose the choices they would have chosen, or to leave the options as open as possible for them. But this is impossible. You choose your religion. You choose literally the birth lottery means you are born in one country and have one country's culture. Lots of cultures do things like circumcision, which are unfixable. If you're just brought up to have certain feelings, you can't unthink all of these things your parents have given you. Or if you do unthink them, then that's time that you've wasted you could have spent doing something else. So even if I bring you up perfectly and give you the complete maximal utility, or exactly what you would have chosen, it's still choosing that that's important. And crucially then, even if this isn't something which happens to every child, it's something which happens with 90% of children, so no person should be able to have a child knowing that the risk of this happening is so large, given that this rights infringement is so terrible. That's so terrible. So I think that, of course, the thing to notice about this is that is also the untrade-off ability of this, right? So when it comes to things like warfare, we don't do torture because it's just wrong. There is no person that is society that we can weigh it up against, right? Like one, it's just like epistemological. Like, I just don't know what's going on in your head. I don't know what your brain chemicals are like. So I physically can't say that you're experiencing more pain than the benefit I'm creating. But secondly, that's just not okay. Like, just bad things are bad and you shouldn't do them. Like, we can say, oh, you wouldn't pull the lever. But I think this does make sense. I think there is a difference between between not doing something, right? I think because crucially, like, if I didn't exist and something happens, then it would happen anyway without my existence. If I did exist and do it, then it wouldn't have happened otherwise. So that's the difference between actively doing a harm and letting it happen. So we definitely do value, like, actively doing something is worse. So, like, this is definitely something which actively doing is just impossible. So, yes.
Just to be clear, are you saying that because children don't get to make rights, that makes their lives worse, or is just one sentence summary?
Well, I mean, it's just a unimaginably large moral harm that we inflict the right of everyone to self-define their lives from the beginning, and this means that just everyone's life is set out in front of them, and that's just something it's because we wouldn't do the same thing to adults, right? If you imagine an adult with a career and you force them to leave all of their friends, their family, their partners, their career, and you say you'll enjoy it more if you move somewhere else. We would never force an adult to do that. So why would we force children to do it, every single child, when we set out their entire lives for it? Okay, animals. Now, like, clearly animals also experience rights, at least to the same extent as children, right? They have pain receptors, they run away from pain, they often they experience trauma, right? If you associate something with pain, they are scared and act irrationally around it. So, and they also then make decisions in roughly the same ways as humans do, or in a kind of roughly equivalent way. So I think then that the fact that all human society intrinsically leads to the death of animals is an unacceptable harm, no matter how good human society is, right? Because if roads exist, we'll run over deer. If cities exist, we'll kill rats by the millions. If any industry exists at all, we will put some kind of pollution into the atmosphere that will kill birds and fish. I think this is just an unacceptable moral harm. But crucially, it's probably just more pain than we enjoy, right? There's only 7 billion humans, but there's hundreds of billions of animals which can definitely feel pain. And there's trillions that maybe can feel pain. So that just is worse, no matter how bad. And then also, human life really isn't that terrible, that great either. We kill each other, we murder each other, we do a whole bunch of war. And crucially, even if that's not consequentially worse, because of the way that rights work, we can never have a child knowing that this will happen, knowing that my child might be a murderer, or on probabilistic chance probably will be a murderer. We can never have that child knowing that they'll commit those rights violations. So we aren't
Let's welcome the first speaker of opposition. Here.
We face ourselves with a huge issue that affects every single person alive today and will affect the lives of future people. What we have to grapple with is the problem of how we avert the various issues which are impending upon us. We believe on this side of the House that this policy is a step in the wrong direction in a very serious and very damaging way. 2 points within my speech. Firstly, the issue, our issues with the assertion that it's unethical to bring children into the world, and why it is actually an ethical benefit to bring children into the world. And secondly, the address to the concerns to do with the environment and to do with the world which exists outside human activity. But firstly, a few points on rebuttal to the PN speech. Firstly, the idea of children having rights and how those are infringed upon during childhood. We would like to point out that newborn babies don't have an ability to exercise many degrees of freedom, if not any degrees of freedom at all, and that children learn the ability to exercise their freedoms in a way which maximizes their future happiness during childhood. And why is this done during childhood? Because childhood provides safe parameters within an environment in which they can express their desires, in which they can utilize their slight degrees of freedom to learn how to express those in the world within an environment of diminished responsibility. So they don't necessarily gain all the harms of the potential decisions which they could make, but they are able to make them and able to develop their own understanding of the world in that way. Secondly, then, to the plight of animals affected by environmental impacts. We sympathise with the concern for the harm and the pain, the harm to and the pain experienced by animals. We completely accept that. We completely understand and assent to that idea. However, what we would argue is that at the point that you stop the presence of future human contributions to the problem, you do not solve the problem. You simply leave the problem where it is, and you simply leave the animals helpless to deal with the various problems which we came in and created in the first place. We believe it's more responsible to potentially contribute to the solving of those problems. Finally, then, a brief point on the assertion that we could use AI to deal with the care of the needs and the elderly. If we can have an AI that can do all those wonderful things, then why can we not have an AI that provides all the potential resources to remove all the conventional forms of suffering? It's kind of a point which backfires. So then, onto my substantive material. Firstly, to the issues of ethics surrounding having children. Here's the point: you cannot guarantee how somebody's future experience will play out. At the point they are born, you cannot guarantee how their life will play out. However, what we can predict and observe is the pain caused by creating a dysphoria between the biological and social predispositions to people who exist in the world. I.e., we can recognise the suffering which is going to happen to people who currently exist. However, it is not so easy to understand and predict and to be assured of the suffering that we could potentially have in the future. So why do we prioritise existing suffering over potential future suffering? Well, here's the thing: there's no net positive to not being born. It's a net neutral. If you never exist, you never experience anything negative or positive. It is a dead neutral. However, given that we can predict the pain of other people who are existing in the world, what you have by preventing the birth of new people, you get a net neutral on one side of the equation and a net negative on the other side of the equation. That is a net loss overall. That does not provide a net positive to the world, much less to children who do not exist. Before I go on to the rest of my material, yes.
Well, exactly. But the thing is, what you're suggesting is we should have those people, which creates the net negative that I was talking about. So unless you're saying global warming's fine because you don't care about people who aren't born yet, then good point.
That goes to segue on to my second point of substantive material. The address of the environmental concerns and the potential issues which we face in our world. As I said before, humans created this problem. We believe it is our responsibility to fix those problems. Conveniently, we're also the only people who are able to really solve these problems. As altruistic as animals might be, their wherewithal isn't quite there in terms of stopping global climate change. Here's the thing: we have no guarantee that we will go through the environmental catastrophes that they're talking about. Environmental policies and technologies are gaining ground. Policies are gaining support, and technologies are being developed further. It is entirely possible that we will be able to deal with it, deal with this issue in a safe way. They cannot guarantee that we will continue to experience the suffering caused by these environmental concerns. What they cannot guarantee, what they cannot say, however, is that this alternative policy would help any of these changes. Secondly, even if we accept that these environmental problems will be solved, let's say if everything continues to go as it will, then the timer runs out. Even if we accept that, here's the thing: somebody born now could very well advance the course of human understanding to a degree that we would be able to deal with those problems. Somebody born now has 100 years in which to contribute to the cause of ensuring that we move off the course that we're currently moving on and onto a better course in the future. So if they truly believe that that's the course we're heading on, it is completely counterproductive to say, well, let's try and mitigate the changes to that current course we could be making. What we want is a situation in which we have as many chances as possible to avert the crisis which they are warning us about. We want to maximise the number of opportunities where we have for somebody to come to the world and to bring a new level of understanding into the world. Here's the thing, that's never going to happen to the people who've been grappling with this problem before and have not been able to solve it. The better chance of new ideas comes from maximising the pool of potential viewpoints that we have on a situation. That logic applies to absolutely any problem that you're hoping to deal with. If you want to find a solution as quickly as possible, what you want to do is you want to get as many viewpoints on that view as possible. What you want is new perspectives, is new ideas, is new inputs to the solution of the problem. So it doesn't make any sense to artificially remove a significant portion of the potential problem-solving population from existence. What we want is a situation in which as many people as possible are able to work as quickly as possible with as many resources as possible to avert the crisis which they warn us of. What we don't want is to head towards their world where we say, well, do you know what, we're on the Titanic, we may as well sit about. There are lifeboats on the other end, but we are never going to find them if somebody doesn't run up the deck and have a look. What we want is a situation in which people can maximise the course towards a safer world for all. Let's avert this economic crisis. Let's clean up the mess we have made. Thank you.
Now let's welcome the second speaker of opening government. Here.
I think David does a pretty good job to prove to you on a deontological metric, on a metric solely tied to morality, why you should vote pro. I'm going to tell you that human life is utility negative. So if you don't buy anything that David tells you, still not having humans alive today increases the amount of utility we have in the world and decreases the amount of pain that we experience, and therefore we should do it. After I do that, I'm going to rebuild some of these things about consent and animal rights, and then I'm going to talk about development. And even if we have the maximum amount of development, still that's not going to tackle all the problems that we set out. So why are humans utility negative? Firstly, because we're utility negative on the environment. We create thousands of dollars worth in destruction, be it from environmental damage, be it from literally building up cities and tearing down natural wildlife, destructing these environments. I think at the pace at which humans are reproducing themselves is not and are growing as a species. The development that we have in terms of technology is not enough to outstrip that, and not enough to make us not destruct enough trees or send animals further back into the forest, etc. But more than that, even if you ignore the harm we do on the environment and on animals, and this harm is definitely felt by animals because animals do have pain receptors in the same way that humans do. But secondly, even if you don't believe that, I think that an average human life is utility negative. There are 1 billion people alive today that live in extreme poverty. They struggle to feed themselves and their children. They suffer from endless disease and poverty. And even if you would argue that there are a lot of people that live kind of decent lives, I think even billionaires live utility neutral lives, or at least positive. They're happy, but they're not happy all of the time. They're not euphoric all of the time, because that's literally not possible. So on a balance, there are people that literally struggle every day with these insurmountable harms, and there are the 1% of the population that maybe lives a life that is utility positive, but not euphoric enough to outstrip all of those harms. So on a balance, human life and the fact that humans exist is utility negative. So if you would prefer a utilitarian metric, there it is, you need to vote pro. In terms of consent, so the things that we hear out of all, in terms of why this consent stuff doesn't apply. So firstly, you do not have freedom. Sure, but so even assuming you as a child don't have rights because you're like too young. Firstly, like within the constitutions of like a lot of countries, it is codified that via normal morality within society, you don't think that somebody just because they're in a coma or just because they're not like able to act on their rights somehow lose those rights. Like just because you're in a coma, that doesn't make it alright for me to like randomly kill you if I do not have your if I don't have the consent of your carer or something like that. More than that, like some people just like cannot exercise like rationale, and I don't necessarily think that like being able to reason is a good enough metric for you to be given rights. I think rights should rather be given on things such as ability to feel pain, ability to make make decisions, and like importantly enough, even if at the moment where these children are born, they don't have these capacities, they will develop these capacities in the future, and all of the harms that are performed upon their person at the moment where they don't have the ability to exert consent all translate into the future as if they're done in the present. Like the intuition pump here is that it's not okay for your parent to put a gun to your head and then force you to become Christian, but somehow it is fine for your parents to indoctrinate you ever since birth to become Christian. Like I think it's literally the same thing. It is equally morally abhorrent. More than that, like you literally can't consent into existence, right? So that is a harm within itself. But more than that, given that I've already told you that the majority of people live horrendous lives, it is literally your moral burden to live with like all of the pains that your child experiences all throughout their life, because you were the one that made the decision to birth them. Therefore, all of the negative impacts that they receive all throughout their life are your burden. Like literally, I don't necessarily understand. No, thank you. Why, like, when exactly, if you can draw a line between when, like, the consent part of your brain develops enough so that magically you as a child become an adult, that's not a thing. And I think it just goes to speak how like, unreasonable this burden is. Then they tell us, but your brain is built in such a way so that you maximize your happiness. I think there are things outside of your means that make you unable to actually maximize your happiness. Things such as you being arbitrarily born in a very poor family. You literally even if your brain makes you rationalize that, I literally can't rationalize living on the brink of starvation every day. Closing, do you have something?
Sure. So just because you can point to examples where sometimes your absolute rights would outweigh your right to life, that doesn't mean that you can claim that any rights violation is more important to a person than their right to life.
Right, but the thing is that, I do not think that we're killing people. We're not taking people's, rights to life away. And also, I think what, David's intuition pops, where that sometimes, you need to, consent and freedom is way more important than consequential outcomes at the moment where you do and wake up. However, I think we already proved on a balance of harms why life is utility negative as well. So in terms of innovation and the capacity of humans to bring out new ideas. So on our side of the house, the only beings that are alive are animals. Therefore, innovation would only be worthy at the moment where you prove that animals, one, have necessitate humans so that they live good lives, basically that. And then there are people that are there that are willing to actually make those innovations for animals happen. So I think that David already does a very good job in proving to you why humans are not interested, and there are aspects of human culture that are intrinsically tied to being violent to animals. So there are cultural practices that that imply that you sacrifice animals. It's not just environmental harms. Humans are set up their community so that they continuously harm animals. But more than that, I think that climate change, literally climate change is going to become irreversible in 12 years. No matter how much innovation you have in that time frame. Literally, the coasts of Bangladesh are already being flooded and climate refugees are everywhere. There is not enough time for us to pick up our shit and get things going. And if I look at the state of society right now, I think it's just wishful thinking to believe that people are going to put their rational self-interest aside and act in the way that they say they're going to act. Beg you to propose one of those reasons.
benefit to my life in the sense that I will be able to bring something up, be able to imbibe my kind of values, to create a form of legacy that lives on. Benedict just giving that speech for me was like a very small window into the world in which what having children would look like. Like, to see how you can really like change someone, how they present themselves, how you can sort of teach them, educate them, that is a huge benefit to, I literally think, a part of the human experience. It's like how we actually live our lives and see who we are in the future. I therefore personally can not understand why we would ever want to push a policy that ever removed that from the human experience and created a world in which people literally felt their way. Because at the point where people even voluntarily opt into this policy, we think that there is likely to be a huge social push to try and stop people from doing this, right? To be effective, you've got to have a significant number of people participating in this. Even if it's voluntarily, it's likely to be a heavily coerced decision for many people. Crucially, missing out on that form of human experience, people who actually live right now and feel pain and suffering, I honestly cannot imagine what that would feel like. And people who do not have the ability to have children, therefore cannot have children, feel immense pain and suffering throughout their life. That pain is actually real. It is a pain in your very self and like how that feels. And we think that missing out on that experience through this is something that we can actually see and actually, I hate the word, actualize than a potential suffering of someone who doesn't exist. As Benedict did point out, people not existing is almost net neutral, but in the real world that plays out in the fact of actual pain, actual suffering. We cannot guarantee what that child will necessarily feel, and therefore there is an uncertainty of positive and negative. And therefore, to weigh whether humankind should do this action, we should probably look at a metric of what is going to cause the least amount of pain to the most number of people. We would say that people who are living now can feel pain, can understand what that pain looks like, and therefore we should seek to prioritise those people over that. The crucial problem with OA's case in that sense is that they don't give us solid reasons to presume why, in many situations where we sacrifice some people's rights over another to create positive benefits to one group over another, why we should prioritise the lives of unborn children over the lives of, for example, people who feel the biological need to have children. In this instance, I'm going to prove why we should prioritise those people over that. So that's basically going to be my case. It's just effectively extending on that, like why we prioritise current pain and suffering over the potential pain and suffering of something that can't even feel pain and suffering yet. So a quick thing on the whole environmental and animals thing that just keeps coming up. So we point out one thing. It's just like, as Benedict pointed out, they want to talk about like humans continue to cause suffering because of cultural practices, because we're just terrible people in general. We would say that like potentially there are other things we can do beyond human extinction to stop people harming animals, right? There are potentially other policies which can be imbued, like conservation efforts and things like that, which obviously have that same sort of effect. But crucially, what Benedict told you is that in the situation whereby humans decide to go extinct and just leave things be, it is unlikely that we will be very focused on the idea as we should just leave the planet in the best state possible for the animals. Ultimately, we need to give people incentives to be able to say, this is something we should be doing. We think the solution is probably in the human brain, given we have one of the most complex set of reasoning ability in the animal kingdom, and therefore it is our obligation, because we know we created those problems, to create solutions that potentially save the animals in this world. Then they give this other argument about the fact that we should give people, and crucially respect animal rights because of the idea of feeling pain and suffering. No, we think that's the reason for giving them protections, right? We think that's the reason that we owe a responsibility not to kill them or harm them, in the same way that we don't give children, like babies, rights because, as Benedict pointed out, they can't exercise them. Toddlers can't exercise their rights because their brains aren't developed enough to be able to understand how they can make those choices, and crucially we allow you to make more choices in that way. Therefore we think that was a bit of a strange argument. Why do we think human life is not net utility negative? This argument I've had many, many times over the years. So why don't we think human life is net utility negative, right? Because if they point out that human life is just altogether bad, then therefore that's a good reason for never having kids. That could potentially be. Why is human life not utility negative? Because we think ultimately they cannot prove that there are any particular harms guaranteed in a human life, right? There's no particular instance that we all share that crucially means we will all have an instance of suffering some particular point of pain. They gave us no reasons why to believe that any human will experience any form of pain, in the same way that I cannot guarantee you that you will experience benefit. What I can tell you, though, is that the future world is likely to be one that is better than the one that exists right now, right? Like we are developing the kind of technologies that spread resources, which means that a higher proportion of people have been lifted out of poverty in the last 50 years than have been over the last 200. We would say that life on this planet is conclusively getting better, and I'll take you in a second, which means that ultimately the chance that you will be born into a more affluent life has highly increased over time and is likely to continue to do so. Yes?
We've had the knowledge about how, for example, consumption of meat harms the environment and animal ethics for years, but we never did anything substantive about it. What makes you think in your world, which is the status quo, that's going to change fast enough to overcome what we've already brought?
Okay. you have to assume it's possible that humans are going to make themselves go extinct. I think it is a reasonable assumption on our side that we continue to develop the kind of technologies which we're currently doing for example, carbon extraction from the air. I think that is a reasonable intuition that if you get to do that, we can possibly say that humans are going to continue to do activities they're already doing, possibly at a faster pace, as the problem becomes more acute, as has happened with things like the Paris Climate Accords, which was one of the most radical policies put into place globally for this time period. What is the importance, and why can I say that there are great aspects of human life that I think prioritise that? Crucially, we have to say that if percentage of people have come out of poverty, what does their world look like compared to our world, in a world where they decided that humans should be voluntarily extinct? Because recognise there are still people who continue to rely on the family structure and having children to lift themselves out of poverty, to live that potential future life. So on our side, that leaves a lot of people in a situation where they don't end up having children, which means that ultimately they live in probably some of the greatest forms of deprivation and harm, where they live in the world where they are living, where they cannot get basic needs fulfilled. We think the support for family structure is incredibly important. That crucially, it's like to create a massive demographic crisis, right? If we can't say that the AI is going to produce the kind of resources to be able to support and get rid of poverty, they also can't be like, well, there's going to be no demographic crisis in nations which no longer have children to support the demographic structure, in which case they are bringing huge amounts of pain to people who exist now, who feel pain now, and therefore are likely to undermine that. Look, we think that current harm, pain that people actually feel right now, is something we should prioritise, because ultimately pain felt now is real. It's something people starving to death is something that they can experience now. A future child who potentially might live in a world where potentially we don't solve the problem is a lot more tenuous and a potential harm where actually we think there are a lot of reasons to believe they will never feel that harm, compared to someone who actually feels the pain and suffering now of not having a child. The actual pain and suffering of starving to death because no one develops that technology to be able to look after them in their old age. We think that is something that we can see as a pain now, and therefore that's why we should prioritise this. Therefore, we're very happy to oppose.
For an excellent start to the debate. Let's welcome the first speaker of closing government.
May I begin? Honourable panel, ladies and gentlemen, people watching at home. Consider the cosmos and consider the silence that echoes throughout space. An infinite universe should be noisy, and instead we find every planet barren. Human history constitutes an infinitesimally small fraction of a fraction of the history of life on this planet, both past and future. And our planet too may well fall silent, not just for this generation, but for all lifetimes to come due to our actions. Our stewardship of this planet is a blink of an eye, and we think it's incredibly important we recognize that morality is species neutral. OG paid lip service to this. We think this is the brunt of the debate. I'm going to do three things here. Firstly, I'm going to explain why animals have rights, and why those rights specifically and in total must outnumber the entirety of human rights that do exist, even if they are different or derived from different causes. Secondly, I'm going to explain why humans are inevitably going to degrade animal rights and the environment to such an extent that if humans exist, there is no choice but to make a trade-off between the rights of animals and the rights of humans. And thirdly, I'm going to do exactly what Katie correctly identified OG did not do, which is explain why when you have two groups of agents that both have rights, you ought to prioritize one set of rights versus another, and explain why in this circumstance, on 4 different metrics, animals ought to be prioritized over humans. Let's go in onto why animals have rights. So obviously, before that, one extraneous point of rebuttal regarding the importance of family and the importance of children and the harm that we might end up accruing to the humans that exist that make this decision. So obviously, there is some extent to which our desire for a family structure and the specific type of family structure is socially conditioned. Now, I know that might not be true for everybody, and that obviously would not make it any less real if that were true, but there are a huge number of people who don't have any inherent desire to reproduce or to have children. So, for example, if that were true, it's unlikely that LGBT people would exist, right? Like, clearly this is not the strongest of our instincts regarding our human biology. But what that does mean is that in this presumable interim period, we can obviously take the sorts of necessary steps in order to mitigate the social conditioning of social structures that exist, to start deprioritizing the importance of children. The fact that we currently teach little girls that becoming a mother is often the benchmark of what would constitute success. That we teach people that they ought to look up to your parents blindly, and therefore when we ourselves become parents, we condition ourselves after them. All of those are social structures that cause us to create this. So yes, it might be true that there is this harm that we're imposing upon people, but I don't necessarily think this harm is one, that inherent, and two, so whole that it ought to outweigh the other things we're going to discuss within this debate. On to why animals have rights. So there are a number of ways in which we might decide why someone ought to derive rights. So So for example, we decide that some people ought to have rights because they can demonstrate intelligence. This is the reason that we give, for example, human beings rights. But we still give children rights even though they're not intelligent. Well, okay, that might be because they might have rights in the future, but also because we recognize that they can experience pain. And obviously pain is particularly important because pain is the existence of harm, which you might in and of itself want to prevent. We recognize that children and other creatures have the ability to feel emotions. Well, that means that you can participate in broader social structures like family or community. And obviously rights are nothing more than the policing of social structures and what can and cannot participate. So if someone is going to be a participant in them, we must have rights in order to protect that participation. All of these are things that a large number of animals do experience. We think animal intelligence is very widely documented. So for example, the fact that Coco the gorilla is able to communicate with humans using British Sign Language, the fact that parrots are able to use human speech to communicate with us. You might say it just means that the robot, the gorilla or the parrot, like a robot, is just learning to mimic the things that humans are teaching it and to associate that with particular ideas. But that's no different to what humans are doing. The only difference is we happen to be doing it at a faster rate of calculations per second within our brain than a gorilla is able to. But nonetheless, we think that animals do demonstrate huge amounts of intelligence, otherwise they wouldn't be able to do things like hunt their prey, or to coordinate their packs, or to be able to even know to go back to a certain part of the ocean in order to reproduce, and so on. On all of these metrics, we think animals consistently demonstrate that they might have some sort of right. On to, though, the more important things here. We cannot actually know whether animals have personalities, whether they have future ideations or desires, whether they form complex senses of identity. And given that we cannot read their minds, it's important that we recognize that that might be a right that we're infringing on, and we take steps to prevent it. In all other circumstances, we're actually preemptive about the kinds of ways we restrict our rights violations. Secondly, just on a numbers game, even if this means they have fewer rights than humans, and different sorts of rights to humans, they certainly have existential rights, and there are overwhelmingly more of them than humans are on the planet right now. So overall, all animals should always outweigh all humans. But thirdly, and most importantly, if a human lives somewhere cold, we can just wear a coat. An animal can't do that. So unlike humans, animals are far more dependent upon the environment, and so consequently, their environmental rights necessarily have to outweigh our rights to living upon this planet. So secondly, onto why humans are inevitably going to degrade animal rights and the environment. Frankly, the political capital is not there. We've had the knowledge of what to do about the environment forever, and we have never taken that action. Why? Because businesses have incentives not to do so. Unlike any other form of animal, our consumption can be influenced. An animal does not respond to advertising, but we still consume meat because MacDonald's put adverts on our TV. Humans are selfish. We're necessarily short-termers because of our lifespan. So we will only consider a harm that's going to enact in our lifetime, like the OO case, by the way, but we never consider what might happen in the future, even though there are individuals that are going to have to face that. I mean, frankly, I think that the degradation that is existing is not only harmful for that reason, it's actually likely to accelerate beyond the natural capacity of evolution to be able to respond to this. Because animals are able to respond to changes over time, but human beings who don't need to do that because we're environment independent don't care about accelerating that change. So we necessarily have incentives to ignore that. The most they say is that we can still take care of animals and we can still do better for the world going into the future. But that requires significant amounts of economic and government resources to do so. Animals don't vote. Animals don't buy your products. And in any case, even if we were doing that, no human is devoting 100% of their time to the environment. So even if we're making lip service to the environment, we're still spending all of the rest of our time consuming energy, eating food, going places, and so on. And I think necessarily this means we degrade that. Before that, a POI.
Yeah. Why should humans prioritize animal pain over human pain if we are as selfish as you want to talk about?
Sit down, because this debate isn't this house as humans, it's this house supports human extinction, and I think the moral agent is species neutral. Onto the trade-off of rights and why we want to prioritize animals in this sense. When we're considering which set of rights we might want to prioritize versus another, there are a number of ways we might decide who has a responsibility to give up that right or not. The first is a utilitarian metric. If more individuals are being harmed more keenly than another group of individuals, clearly we want to prioritize that set of rights. So for example, I might kidnap someone and use my bodily autonomy to restrict their bodily autonomy, but I'm not facing a harm or a benefit from kidnapping them. They're facing a huge harm, and so we clearly don't allow that to happen. As I mentioned earlier, utilitarian metric, we prioritize animals. Secondly, dependency. We are consenting into this voluntarily, but animals have no choice. They're dependent upon our decision to be able to enact any of their rights. Thus, we have to prioritize that. Thirdly, causal. Animals are only in this situation because of our actions. In the same way that if I steal a loaf of bread, I have to give that back and not someone else. Human beings have an individual moral responsibility to make sure that animals get to survive. And finally, retributive. That animals have given so much to humans. We eat them, we grind them into dust if they're a male chick, just so we can have eggs. We force cows to live in a state of extended pregnancy just so we can enjoy milk. We have a huge moral responsibility as humans to recognize that we done fucked up, we're out of here.
Welcome the first speaker
I want to begin by reflecting on the significance of the human experience. What you and I share, and I don't think we share, by a host of animals or species or leaves, is that we are able to, in incredibly complex ways, understand one another and understand the impacts that our decisions and behaviours have on our society and on nature. They're going to claim animals are intelligent, they have some perception of the consequences that exist there. I think we're going to contest that intelligence is anywhere near on par the level of comprehension we have of the impacts that our behaviours have on one another. I also think that's a unique benefit, right? We are, to the best of our knowledge, the only species in the universe capable of doing that. I think the extinction of the human race then is the destruction of the capacity of individuals to make moral decisions at all. Several things in this speech. One, what's significant about the human experience? Why we think it all be prioritized over the experiences of even a great many number of animals. And second, why even in circumstances where individuals experience tremendous amounts of suffering, why their lives continue to be significant and the fact that they are born is still important and special. Before that, Sir rebuttal to opening government, very brief. Because they said that there's an absolute violation, there's an absolute principle that you cannot violate an individual's rights, and that children at some point in their lives will necessarily have rights violations. One, no, this argument relies intuitively on a set of examples that are not indicative of the experiences of most humans. Clearly, I don't want to live in a box for the entirety of my life. Most humans don't live in a very small box for the entirety of their life. The kinds of rights violations most people experience are way softer than literally being physically restrained to a metre by metre square. And most people, I think, have an intuitive preference for being alive, even if that comes at the cost of experiencing those rights violations. But all rights get traded off when they're implemented through moral decisions, right? There's no right that I have that doesn't in some way infringe on the rights of other people when I express it. And the fact that we are willing to make those trade-offs clearly implies that in at least some circumstances, the value of the experience of life can be traded off positively against even some subsets of rights violations. So that's opening government, I think, out of what is significant about the human experience and why do we find it valuable? I think the first thing that's really significant about the human experience is its rarity. I think, to the best of our knowledge, we're the only species, that exists that has a capacity to deeply and complexly understand the kind of decision-making that we have, and to pass critically, not just like an experience of that as significant, but moral judgment on our behaviour, to intelligently understand and comprehend and discuss the ways in which those decisions affect other people and construct morality in that way. The reason why rarity is significant is I think in a lot of circumstances, we are willing to opt for protections of rarity, things that would go out of existence if you didn't destroy them, over the net neutral consequences, right? Like, animals near extinction are often prioritized in terms of protection compared to animals who are not near extinction, specifically because we think there's something valuable about that. And indigenous tribes that are near to extinction as well are groups that we are willing to prioritize over other groups because we think the unique experience that they are able to offer is something that's significant even if that comes at a net cost overall. I think additionally, the way in which harm exists is via perception, right? And I think Nisha loses this when he says that animals are significant because they're able to experience physical pain. But it's the fact that they're able to experience that physical pain that makes it a harm in the first place. And the fact that we as humans are able to experience a far greater and far wider variety of harm and a far greater and far wider variety of benefits grants more significance to the moral harms and consequences that accumulate to us. Because I'm able to very, very complexly understand the ways in which I appreciate and value debating, and I'm able to assign a significant, substantial value to that relative to myself. I don't think that benefit exists objectively. It's something that I constructed. And what's significant here is Nish wants you to believe that the actor in this debate is morally species neutral, and it could be a cat. But critically, I think the people making these decisions are like human parents who are opting to have children. And insofar as the relationships you have with other people are more significant, the relationships you have with people you don't know very well. Like, it's reasonable for mothers to prioritize the experiences of their children relative to a child they know nothing about, precisely because they've constructed that person complexly in relation to them, and morality isn't a thing that exists magically, objectively somewhere else, but is rather a value that we've imposed on that relationship. What's significant then is that it's reasonable for parents to opt
to have children, even if that comes at the cost of the experiences of animals, precisely because they prioritize the relationships they have with their child over the relationships that they would have with animals and systems. But also I think morality isn't something that exists independently of humans. I'm not convinced that a universe absent intelligent life is a universe that has moral systems at all, right? We decided that we were going to place value or decide what actions are or not significant based on the trade-offs that we prefer. I think the precondition of a decision having moral significance is that decision is made from the perspective of someone who is able to comprehend morality. It's unclear that in the absence of the existence of a species who can comprehend morality in a significant way, that morality would continue to exist, and in the absence of humans, that you would be willing to assign a value to the experience of the animals who continue to exist in the absence, right? If you're just sensing pain, but you don't ascribe to that any particular moral significance, it's unclear that we would just defer to a utilitarian metric in those circumstances. I'll take a POI from
Okay, so if you value rarity or experience, why the current existence? Surely this is an obligation to have as many children as possible, because experience is so great, you get as much experience as possible. Clearly that's ridiculous.
No, I think what's rare here is that we are the only species with a capacity to have incredibly intricate and complicated moral systems that we discuss and construct collectively together. That's the thing you risk losing if you no longer have any humans on the planet. I think moral value generally evaporates at the point where there's no longer exist. Okay, let's talk about suffering now, right? Because I think individuals, even if you experience a high degree of suffering, and here we'll take opening government at the very highest burden and say even individuals who experience high
Three things in this speech. Firstly, response to opposing opposition to extension. Secondly, weighing our substantive case against opening government. Sorry guys. Thirdly, independent responses going to end to opening opposition. Responses to opposing opposition. First thing. I think the first thing to note is that Mark genuinely cannot prove a lot of his claim. So the claim goes that humans have rights that are more important or more valuable because they have deep, complex understandings of politics, of philosophy, and they construct morality. But as Nish points out, we can't read the minds of animals. We don't understand their languages or how they communicate. We cannot know that an animal doesn't have those capacities or faculties. That'd be like saying French people don't have the same rights as me because I don't speak French, therefore I don't know if they have a construct of morality. Sorry anyone for the French in the audience. But also, I think this is the more pertinent response, is just to say, Mark doesn't analyze where rights come from, why they come to exist, and why one brand of intelligence is more important than another type of intelligence. Example being that we've discussed that children do have rights, but they usually also don't exercise the higher capacities that humans have. But we still give them equivalent rights from the moment they're born. We don't give them more rights as they exponentially grow older. The last thing to say is, I think, if anything, you should trade off the rights of those who have lower intelligence and prioritize those who are probably more vulnerable and more dependent. It's the analysis Nick gave you on causation, as in because we cause on harms that lead them, you should probably prioritize, and because our intellectual capability to make us more culpable for the damages, because we have the knowledge to cause those damages, that means it worse. Weighing us against OG. So the bulk of our case is about humans and children, about the ontology of humanity and the utility-negative nature of human existence. I think all of this must fall behind Nish's analysis on animals and the rights they have are violated, at the point where, as Casey rightly identifies, we give the trade-off as why animal rights ought to be prioritized more. That is to say, we told you that there was a retribution right for animals, we told you about the utilitarian rights. There are 6 billion people in the world roughly. There are, I don't have a number, there are way more than 6 billion animals, including every species, every animal, and so on. I think that crucially means it falls, all our analysis of humans falls behind the animal rights stuff because we showed why their rights are more important. I'll take you after the way.
in terms of comparing our own analysis of animals versus their analysis of animals, I think there's a few things in this as that are quite crucial. So the first thing is that we address the challenge that Owen as to why this isn't the only way you could solve for things like environmental degradation. So that states could enact policies to protect the environment and do other nice things, and this isn't the only way. I think we get over that by explaining the inevitability of causing damage to animals, such as the lack of political capital to actually desire to change it. The fact that, if you are a democracy, politicians just don't pander to people that don't care, to people who care about the environment because it's such a small minority of people. Sure.
Why do you get the moral assumptions debate that humans will take the ultimate burden assessing this, that they will go extinct, but we can't have some reasonable assumption that humans will carry on the work of reversing climate change and ultimately seeking to look at animals? Why is that a fair burden?
Because it's literally the debate, it's literally the real world. It's not my fault that climate change is inevitably going to happen because we've only got 12 years to prevent it and not enough political capital. Literally the president of the second biggest polluters in the world is a climate change denier. The burdens might not be fair, but it's just the motion is the world in which we live. I think then that the last thing to say on the way is that while we do say animals feel pain, for example, they don't acknowledge why those rights derive from that pain. It's only in Nishith speech you get beyond an assertion that animals have rights, that you get the reasons why animals have those rights to be violated. So for example, Nishith talks about the intellectual capacity. The ground says that because people have intelligence, that they deserve some sort of rights. It's only in Nishith speech you get the stuff on how we often just construct rights and the existence of rights for consequential benefit. Maybe it's good that we give animals rights so they don't get stuck in bad conditions, so that might be a utilitarian benefit. So the last reason that our animal analysis speaks there is because why do the rights exist at all? For there to be any value of that only comes in seal cooling. Independent responses to OO that didn't quite fit in. So I think the first thing to note is, in terms of our analysis, is why you should prioritize current pain and the pains of people who are currently living over those of future people. Firstly, animals are still living today, so it doesn't address any of our now, even if you buy that wholeheartedly, and you only care about people that are existing, you should care about the animals that are existing today, which again, are vastly more numerical and therefore a larger group of people. But secondly, I just think it's not true to say that you shouldn't care about future people. You have obligations to future animals. Well, we don't care about them. We have obligations to future animals because the causation of the harms they're going to experience is your fault. It's the same as the analogy we gave about if I steal David's water bottle, I either have to give it back or reimburse him in some form because that is a rights violation. The same holds true of future people. You're still violating their potential rights. They say because you're a future person, you can't have a right. But then, I just don't think that's true. I don't actually have any philosophical justification beyond an intuition, how to say, that as Jacqueline and I once did a debate, do you ever owe obligations to people you've never met before? Because a future person is probably just a person you haven't met. The last thing I want to say is not a debating point, it's more a personal belief. In debating vote for CG, in the real world, please vote for all, because I sincerely believe that the world and humanity is moving advance.
rebuttal before I go into the three main clashes in this debate. Firstly, like animals and the environment. Secondly, on the point of suffering. And thirdly, on morality. And then I'll touch upon what Mark uniquely brings to you and why we win this debate. Okay, so a little bit of rebuttal to OG. OG tell us that it's immoral to have like humans and that like children have rights. So what Mark raises in a POI, we point out repeatedly, like the trade-off here is either life or not life. And it's a long-term impact that we bring to you is that we value life over like not having life in the form of humans. They also tell us that like children are coerced into like being in situations that they don't have like the ability to consent into, right? Like clearly this there's a lot of situations, but we also have like the right to life, and we think that this is like the right to life is uniquely more important than the quality of life in these like small minority of cases. Also, Mark tells you exactly why we're uniquely important in the environment, why the human experience is very important in its own existence. They also talk about like negative utility and destruction. I think the solution to this isn't like removing humans, right? Like destruction and evolution is like inevitable in like some sort of form. So sure, like if we're causing this destruction, we also have the ability to reverse it. And also another response to like this thing that OG brings us about like people are unhappy. Sure, like even if people are unhappy, they might be unhappy for a couple minutes, they might be unhappy for a couple of years. Regardless, we believe that right to life is more important than, and life itself has a value that's intrinsic to life itself. And regardless of whether people are happy or not. Okay, some responses to CG. So Mark tells you very importantly, like this fact that neither babies that who be born also don't have rights in the same way that animals don't have a choice, and in the same way, like babies who will never be born also don't have an ability to choose this. So I think the thing like the way and like the trade-off here is like either way we're making a decision for someone or something that can't make a decision themselves. In this case, we say we prioritize babies and we prioritize the human life in this decision rather than animals. Also some more responses to what CG brings, right? Like so even if animals have rights, we say that these rights are less important than humans, even if there are more animals in the first place. Because I think there is a clear difference between the type of rights that animals have and the kind of rights that humans have, right? And I think this difference is like astronomical in like the types of rights that like the two different groups have. And I think it's quite intuitive when you like think of it, like how many cats would you kill to save a baby's life, right? Because like we intuitively know that there's going to have to be like a huge number of cats killed to add up to like one baby's life, and therefore we think that like proves to you why we care more about the rights of humans than the rights of animals in general. And thirdly, that we say that animals are not a species neutral actor because we, as humans, we care more about humans. Like a mother cares more about her child. I think that's reasonable. I think that's sensible, and that's why we do CG. So moving on to the three main clashes. So firstly, on the environment, Mark tells us about morality and the basis of morality, and that it comes from humans, and it comes from human perception, and therefore that's why humans are vitally important and vitally unique in the environment itself. In regards to animal rights, this means animal rights, yes, are in this instance less important than human rights, as humans are intelligent. Mark's proved to you why that's important. And then going on to the second clash point on suffering, no thank you. Mark tells us in a POI, the metric on which this clash on suffering should be weighed is that like even if we take CG on the like best case scenario, we point out to you the life itself is just logically like more important for humans, and like in the minority of cases where like humans child suffering happens, like the vast majority of cases this isn't true. We care more about like just humans existing in the first place. And moving on to like the third point, no thank you, on the point of like morality. I think evidently that we win on this clash when like Mark tells you that like the fact that morality exists is only because like humans themselves create morality, and like at the point that humans like cease to exist, like morality also doesn't exist, and therefore we win on that. So what does Mark bring to you in his extension? We tell you that like humans are extremely important and are extremely special in a very complex way. The fact that we're like rare in the environment and that we're deeply complex and that we like just exist in the universe as a whole, that's what we risk to lose when humans cease to exist, right? Our intelligent perception of the world and how we affect other people is vitally important in this debate when we're talking about like the extinction of humans all around, right? Like the way that we should help like the environmental like harms are like outweighed when the way we have to help the environment and we're applying morals to like all things. Mark tells you why we should prioritize like human moral values over like the environment as a whole, and also how like the significant decisions we make, the way that we impart like our actions to the world are significant, and we are rare as humans, and that is important. Yeah.
So there exists a possible world where animals should not be prioritized over humans. That's why we said it's better to save. But there is no world where you don't indoctrinate your children who have the right to life, but not the right to be born.
Okay, right, yes. I think I've already covered this in like my rebuttal, saying that like, yes, sure, humans like don't have the right to be born, but like at the same time we support that like they have the ability to be born in the first place, because like to exist, like we believe that that's just more important than like just not existing at all, right? And finally, like what Mark tells you in his speech is that the many people like have a personal choice and want children. This is like the biological purpose of people, and we have an ecological purpose to reproduce and to exist on a whole. Also, yeah, and we bring to you that I think we win this debate on all the clashes, and therefore we win it all.
Thank you to all speakers of the debate. Now the judges will go on to deliberate, but good job.